sir. Very happy to have you back again. Wow, have things increased since we had you
Well,
on here?
well, they certainly have, unfortunately, or whatever, depending on how you look at it, I guess.
Right.
Uh, it certainly is it's a pleasure to be back on again.
Thank you.
We those folks that are not familiar with what we're talking about, I guess everybody really is for the most part, at least have a somewhat of an insight or an idea. But what we're talking about, of course, is the pending return of Nibiru, or Planet X. It's got a multitude of names referred to as a wormwood in the Bible, and of course there's been many tags on the name of this. Let's say the 9th or 10th planet returning on a large orbit that has had it coming around. There's kind of a debate as to whether it's every 3,500 years or 350 years, and that relates strictly to a simple question between different groups that have studied it, followed it. Many of them, folks that have certainly studied it longer than I have, people that have spent their entire lives in the pursuit of understanding and studying the planet of Nibiru, and the simple question between whether it has come around 10 times of 350-year cycles, or if it has come around only on a 3,500-year, only to the fact that the numerical conversion from the old times, and of course there have been many updates on calendars and what have you, that type of thing, a lot of changes obviously over, let's say, a period of 1,000 years or 2,000 years since the time of Jesus Christ. It certainly has been a lot of variations on calendars and what have you. But the big deal was that they did not utilize the simple figure 0 until some period of time, like in the time of Caesar or something like that. So when they were writing 3-5, whether it was 350 or 3500, it makes a big difference relative to the time. It's either 3,000 or 300. So there's kind of a debate, but that's not relevant. It's the studies of the people that have really done serious studies for many, many years. The bottom line is that it appears that it will be returning soon, and in terms of soon, some people have figured it down to the very day, being some point in time in either March, late March, or early April. And that was a period of time that all of the people that have done the real historic in-depth studies, some of them, like I say, for 30 years of their lives, all kind of agree that there's no question that the previous time when a catastrophic heavenly body did this passing close between the earth and the sun, and did their pass and caused unbelievable havoc on the face of the earth, and it literally was always the March to April period of time. So the next point, it was like relative to all of the scriptures, the biblical accounts that fit into it, and of course the even including the Chinese emperors going back a couple thousand years. Their astronomers had always marked it at the same point in time, and even geologists, when they do those samples where they dig into the ground and they can actually read the geological, let's say the earth itself in the ground, and they can measure periods of time where there was either a lot of growth, vegetation on the earth, or there was absolutely none on several sequences for like a period of 50 to 100 years with almost no growth at all, and then it would start up again, and then in a period of time there would be another, let's say, a stripe running through the ground of the Earth itself, and would indicate that there was another period of the same kind of non-vegetation where all living things were predominantly wiped off of the Earth. And they can go back, of course, and they're still doing that actually on a daily basis. They do it in the North Pole, the South Pole, and of course all around the equator. And all of these vegetation periods of no growth are they match up. They're identical around the globe. So something happens every 300 years that is causing a complete destruction or pretty much a wipe off of things growing. So all of these things, you have to put those all together. Now, as far as, and there are people that have really, like I say, just been studying the Planet X Nibiru itself. And there's a fellow named Gil Broussard who has done a really in-depth, I think, a wonderful investigation on this for many years himself. And you people can look that up on the computer on Gil Broussard, and he has this fantastic group of charts and things of that sort to explain and how it relates to the Christian Bible and the events that have already taken place previously. And he literally lived in China for a while and had the ability to study the library and the old accounts from the Emperor of China and the astronomers that worked for the Emperor, and all of it corresponds. It comes up the same period of time and the same effects globally. But how I got into it, and I produced this a report, a DVD program, and did it, and actually worked a couple of years on it myself, because I have been, I'm a government whistleblower, if you will, and I have been involved with chasing criminality in the government for many years myself. I've been a federal witness. I've testified before the Senate Intelligence Committees. I worked for at least 5, if not 6 or 7 major government inquiries, working, supplying information for the congressional inquiries, actually several of them that were some of the biggest in the history of our country in the last 50 years, I guess. And so when I started looking at, had someone come to me and said, "Hey, Bob, we're missing billions and billions of dollars out of these different budgets. This is like about 3, but we're talking tons and tons of gold vanished. It's not there anymore." When a couple of years ago, when some of the governments wanted to get some of their gold back out of Fort Knox, they actually were told that they couldn't get it, and they even couldn't get an audit. They couldn't even find out how much of their gold was left. And in Germany's case, we're talking 1,500 tons of gold that they had on deposit at Fort Knox that they could not retrieve any of it. Now, eventually, after a year or so, 2 or 3 years ago, after a year of doing a lot of shenanigans, they did get some of their gold. But the bottom line is the gold in Fort Knox is gone. We've got budget fraud going on all over the place, and I couldn't figure out why. And I of course, had nothing to do with Nibiru in my mind. I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know a lot. And to me, when it's something that as a guy that's actually been a candidate for the United States Congress in 1990 myself, and being involved with the inquiries professionally for such high-level investigations. I even did an inquiry for Manuel Noriega's lawyers when he was being charged with drug connections into the government. I was hired by them to do a report. The bottom line was that I didn't know anything about Nibiru, and then somebody came to me and said, well, first off, I'm jumping ahead of myself, and I got to compress all this because I want to answer some update information for you guys. But what what happened when I started looking into it, then I discovered, looking into the money, the vanishing of this money, because my problem was, once I realized that this was real, that there was trillions and billions disappeared, okay, going someplace, being stolen, manipulated or moved or something, and you can't money launder $1 trillion. If you were a big drug smuggler, you have a heck of a time hiding or money laundering $1 trillion, obviously. So I couldn't understand what was happening. Then I found out somebody reminded me of information that I did know back in 1995, and it was reference to underground facilities that were being built. And again, I never chased that too much. I did go down in 1995 under the airport in Denver and verified that, in fact, there was this huge facility which is still under construction in the Denver airport underneath of it. That's real. And it dawned on me, well, wait a minute. So I looked farther into it, and I found that there was actually about 100 underground facilities in the United States. Then I found out that Russia in 2000 and from 2012 through 2014 had been building as many and had created 5,000 underground facilities in Russia. Now in Russia, the facilities, these 5,000 are not all large, gigantic ones like some of the ones are in the United States that can handle 10, 15,000 people underground for a long period of time. But they had built those. They had and they had a time schedule for themselves, and that was that by the beginning of, I believe it was 2014 or 2015, by the January of either 14 or 15, that those 5,000 were to be completed and ready for occupancy if needed. Same case in the United States. They had been putting for years huge amounts of the foodstuffs, dried stuffs, survival foods. They had contracted with all the big companies, and they were taking about 80% of everything being made in the United States for survival foods and buying it up and putting it underground. And they all have dates. The dates were basically to have the underground facilities ready for use, and within about 7 months ago, they were supposed to be finished and totally up for use. And that, I think they pretty much reached that schedule. Question obviously was, what is it that scared the upper level, the elite upper level of these governments to create underground hideout facilities for survival for themselves? And that led me to the Nibiru possibility, the returning of Nibiru. And so I went ahead and I worked a couple years on research and almost a year producing the DVD report that I had finished 1 year ago when I first released it. And it's a large 4-hour double disc DVD that explains almost everything to do with it, the scientific astronomical reports on it, the biblical parts, the relationship to the Bible, the relationship of the Catholic Church to what's going on, whether they do or don't know about it, and what their attitude is on it, and et cetera, et cetera. So we completed that. It's then since that period of time, I have made several predictions in that DVD. Of course, everybody says, "Oh, you never want to make predictions because if you're wrong, then you're a fool," So everybody steers away from that. But I did make some, and I'd be glad to go over some of those things that have taken place absolutely, as actually everything I mentioned that I thought would happen has happened. And do you have any special question or direction you wouldn't want to go tonight?
Oh, this is such an incredibly vast subject, as you know. I can
Yes.
only imagine that your 4-hour DVD basically is only able to scratch the surface of each one of the elements that is obviously, once you connect the dots, pointing back to some series of events that are so utterly cataclysmic that would cause not just, for example, you may or may not, I don't know what you may know this already, but just for the listening audience, there's been a lot of chatter as of late about the Chinese building a base. Some are referring to it as the Yulin Naval Base in Hainan Island, and it's got evidently the satellite imagery is showing that they've spent a whole lot of money to make sure that their nuclear submarines are able to move in and out of an underground facility on Hainan Island without us being able to detect them. Because one of the tactics used to detect and track the locations of nuclear B-1s have supposedly ridden on these trains and have been there, done that. Supposedly Mount Graham, the Mount Graham facility, which is supposedly where the people in D.C. would head to in case of such a cataclysm or a surprise attack, is also connected to these. But you're everything that you're saying, there isn't a radio show that's long enough.
No, that's
to cover
true.
all.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of people, the folks that don't know me, some people have been following my career since the Iran-Contra inquiries. That was where I first became an interviewed witness in the congressional inquiry relative to the Iran-Contra mess, and then I ended up, from that point forward, I ended up being drawn into, because the people that I was exposed to, all the Central Intelligence and intelligence weapons suppliers, etc., and the overlapping, of course, with drug operations, where we were actually swapping out for the weapons we were supplying into a variety of locations around the globe. We were swapping off for drugs and using the Air Force planes themselves, or Central Intelligence craft, or whichever, and we're bringing back the drugs on the exchange of drugs for weapons, done at the approval and the nod of the President of the United States, which is about as disgusting as you can get. But the people that have known me and what I've done over the last 30 years, and so many different inquiries that I was involved with, they're okay. They understand. They know who I am. The other folks that don't, it would take so much time for me to give you a good update on that. I don't want to really waste much time on that on radio time. Like you say, we have so much tons of information that it's mind-boggling. Now, my DVD, by the way, it's 2 DVDs and it's 4 hours long. Which is, it's kind of tedious in terms of just because it's so long, but like I say, it pretty much does answer all the different questions. And what's great about it, or people that have been so excited about it, I have live footage besides regular photographs. I actually have live footage of some of the underground facilities, which is great, because people automatically, they say, oh, well, wait a minute, this is over my head, and I can't imagine this, and I can't imagine that. But I show the equipment by which they actually are capable of drilling into the side of granite mountains with a single drill so large that once it goes in and comes back out, can drive an 18-wheeler easily into the side of the mountain. If you go in twice, or if you utilize one of the newer drills, which is so gigantic, if they put 2 of them side by side now, and as a matter of fact, the Chinese have a 3-headed drill, each one of them big enough to drill a hole in a mountain to accommodate a single 40-foot 18-wheeler truck. The one they have actually is a triple head, and it's big enough to make a space big enough for a 2-lane highway just passing into the mountain one time, backing out, and it's big enough for two 18-wheelers to go side by side on a single stroke. That's how outrageously big the Chinese drilling equipment is. Ours is equally as huge, but I don't believe we have a triple-headed one yet. But at this point, most all of the major nations of the world, including China, Russia, the European countries, and the United States, and all now have underground facilities that literally are cities underground. And like I said, here in the United States, we have about 100 of them. They're big enough, and they are connected, like you mentioned, they are connected with mag-levitated trains that we've not even gotten but one or two in the United States up ground to above ground for civilian use, but they do have them connecting many of the cities' underground operations and connecting with either highways sufficient for 18-wheelers, which, by the way, we have, like I said, the pictures and the actual motion pictures of underground in these facilities, some of them, and they're big enough and where they're totally connected with either maglev trains or 18-wheeler trucks. I've talked with truck drivers that have made deliveries that have gone underground and drive, let's say, go into a location in Arizona and can come up 1,000 miles away in another state underground, never seeing the light of day until they've completed the trip. So it's pretty amazing, and the success of our government in keeping things secret for so many years, it's so profuse and so well done and so deeply ingrained that the things that we have accomplished and what we are really doing, like in outer space and beyond, is so mind-boggling. It's like Star Wars as far as that part of it is concerned. And for the underground facilities, they have filled them with foodstuffs for survival of 10, 15,000 people in some of the locations. Russia's, the biggest one, is 50,000 people can be kept underground and live rather comfortably underground in Russia. The biggest one they have is about 50,000 for 50,000 people. Now, they are still exclusively designed strictly for the elite at the very highest level of the corrupted covert government that's now running the United States and those in Russia and in Red China. It's not obviously enough for everybody, and they could care less. They've taken their money. The money's gone. The gold's gone. We have no cash. That's all. Of course, cash is a joke anyhow. It means nothing. Has no value. And again, I got into trying to figure out what in the world was going on. What would be the one problem that would all of a sudden constitute all of the big shots of the countries of the world to build underground facilities for themselves? And the answer is the return of Planet X or Nibiru. Now, I want to make a point because, matter of fact, let me briefly mention in my DVDs, and again, I originally released this 1 year ago, approximately a year ago. At that time, had worked on it for a couple of years, got it done, put it out, and I said in the DVD, I said, here are things that you can watch that will take place as this thing progressively moves into coming back and heading back into the heart of our solar system. And let me describe it basically to people that have not looked at this or heard of much detail on this. It appears that Nibiru is about 5, could be 6, 7 times the size of Earth in dimension size. The diameter is about 5 times the size of Earth. It has 3 or 4 moons of its own that actually circle it like its own little solar system. And it, of course, drags behind it miles, millions of miles of space junk trailing along with it as it travels on its orbit. And its orbit is large. It's an elliptical orbit that takes it way out to the very edge of what we would refer to as the Oort cloud, which is this gigantic cloud of space junk, for the lack of a better term, that, believe it or not, and those people that are not aware of it, it totally encompasses the entire solar system. So our solar system is in the middle. If you drew it like a big target, so to speak, the center of the target, of course, being the sun for us, and then our 9 planets circling it being our solar system. And then in that solar system being put into the middle of the whole of another big donut, if you will, called the Oort cloud, which is all this miscellaneous space junk. And it's kind of like we're in the middle of all of that. That whole group as an entity, my belief is, and there's people, again, disagreements on this, so to speak, but my belief is, and I think I'm correct, that Oort cloud with our solar system in the middle of that big donut is actually moving as a singular entity through the entire universe, slowly traveling through it. So you have that thing moving through while all the solar system is doing its common circling of the sun by all the planets. The planet, what they call the plane of the ecliptic, which is basically the plane on which most all of our planets are fairly close to running their orbit around the sun, all of them, as we go on out to Pluto, including Pluto. They are all on the plane of ecliptic. Most of the astronomers related to pursuing the study of Nibiru, they also are split not only on how long the time it takes for this particular planet to come back around on its orbit, being at 350 or 3,500 in years, our years. There's a conflict between whether it's on our plane of the ecliptic, being pretty much on the same plane, like I say, give or take a few million miles, where all of our planets are on. It's kind of like on a flat disk, if you will, that kind of a concept, circling on a big dish or something. But there's an argument as to whether Nibiru may be coming back on 30, 35 degrees or 40 degrees off of the ecliptic, so that it actually could be, it's kind of like thinking in terms of it being, let's say, coming up from the basement to come back around the sun, or coming down from the attic to come down and around the sun, with its orbital tracking being 35 to 40 degrees off of our normal ecliptic. It makes a slight difference relative to where we might expect it to be coming from. And also, it is an infrared planet. It's a planet that's not seen commonly by the naked eye. It does not have its own light, so until it's close enough coming in where it'll start reflecting the light of our sun, we will not see it. There are, of course, major big infrared telescopes that are capable of seeing this, but number one, they're owned and operated by the government that's not going to say anything about it, or number two, some of them are out so far, the planet's out so far, that we would have to put those telescopes out on huge extended satellite orbits or out in space on. So for the last 25 years, we've not been able to do that until fairly recent. And now we have some huge infrared telescopes way out into our planetary solar system, and they now are taking pictures of planets, and they are discovering huge numbers of planets that they never knew about, some of them within our solar system on the outer edge, some of them beyond our solar system also. Now, recently, there has been a discovery just a few months ago. They made a big deal of it. But this is a false flag. This is a discovery that, in my opinion, and many other people have been keeping track of this, that this is not, in fact, Planet X. And they said when they did the news release on this a few months ago, they said, oh, this is it. Maybe this is Planet X. And they got talking about it, but then here's the trick to this thing. What they said was, but it's out so far. Now, they said the size appears to be about what it would be, and it looks like there's other stuff circling it, and it's affecting other planets and things of that sort, or other heavenly bodies, anyhow. And they said that this probably is Planet X. So everybody got excited because it was like an official astronomical announcement and put out into the news medium. All right, even CBS television reported it, okay, on regular network news that, oh, it looks like they really maybe have found us. Okay, this is not Nibiru and it is not Planet X. And what they've done is told everyone that this is out so far, light years and light years away, that at very best, there's no reason to worry about it for another 1,000 years. All right?
Wow.
That's baloney. Okay? Unless the Bible's wrong and all the scriptures and writings of the Tibetan monks of 1,000 years ago on the top of the mountains and all the rest of that stuff, unless that's all, that would completely null and void. That would make all their information and all the scientific astronomical calculations wrong. Another thing is there has been an impression when they put out that press release, they put out the impression that, or they put out the release, and it appears a lot of people thought they said that it has been seen. When they said they found it, that it had been seen. And people are going on the radio and talking about, oh, now they saw this one, they finally found it. No, they never said that. They have not seen it. It is a mathematical formulation. By watching other things moving around, they are assuming that this thing is there, and they are assuming that it's this certain size in order to do the effects on other heavenly bodies. And they are assuming A, B, and C. They have not seen or photographed this thing at all. All right? So, again, it's strictly a false flag press release by a pretty well-known astronomer group, and it's to misdirect people. The big thing of the elitists who have built these underground facilities for themselves, they have full intention of never announcing that this thing is positively coming back, and therefore you could start analyzing a specific time for its arrival. All right? They're not going to ever announce that. They cannot announce it to the world, to the people of the globe, the average guy on the face of the earth, because it will, as soon as they announce that this is a reality and it's going to come back and it will cause the flooding like Noah's floods on the face of the earth, it will take out every satellite before it gets here, its external effects with gravitational and electronic, just the static effect of this thing coming through. It will take out all of our satellites, all of our signals of satellites. So all that will be down. It will even end up affecting the sun so much that solar flares will completely take out our electricity before it's close enough to do other things. All right? It will take out the electricity, et cetera, et cetera. It will be complete chaos. Obviously, the idea of everybody on the globe finding out there's a thing coming in that's going to potentially wipe out 90% of all living things, from animal, mineral, to children, to all of the people living, and all the animals and all the trees and every flower and every piece of corn, all things growing and everything will be wiped out from this thing. Because what it will cause will be activity on the sun more than we've had, which, by the way, has increased many times over in terms of crazy solar flares and now holes in the face of the sun developing, things of that sort, which they can't figure out. But there's no way for them to announce that this thing's coming in. They will not announce it ever. Now, what they must do, this is a political thing, all right? What they must do is have in place martial law prior to the time that people will start seeing it. Now, the bulk people that have been, I think I say, studying this much more than I have for many years, had predicted that between this December that just passed and next 1 or 2 Decembers down the road is going to be the first time that it will be seen visually as a new star in the sky. All right? And it will take approximately 4 to 5 months to come and be going around the sun, circling the sun, then going back out the other side and going back out again on its long journey away from the sun. So it would be a star in the sky in the period of time of about December, and then it would take January, February, and then by March or April, the time of Passover period of time, is when they anticipate that it will be, they will pass and it will eclipse the sun, dragging its, like I say, all this junk behind it and its moons that circle it will go around the sun. It will take 155 days for it to make that journey. Then it will come back out the other side and head off towards the depths of space once again to be gone for hundreds of years. The anticipation was that the very earliest would be this last December here, last month that just passed, or 2 months now, just passed, that it should have been seen as an incoming star. And that if that did not happen, which it apparently did not, and we also have seen they have not done martial law or anything of that yet. So my feeling and the feeling of most people involved is that we probably have a year before we have to worry about it again. But the next potential likelihood would be, since it didn't take place this month, last month, is that next December coming, the December of this year, 2016, it should be seen and should pass on March and April of 2017. So we probably have a year breather, so to speak. All right. Now, and again, this is all done mathematically related to the historic and geological information of the previous passing of this planet, and going by biblical and going by the writings of the monks and the Emperor of China and all of those who, by the way, the Emperor 1,000 years ago in China had very, very advanced astronomical astronomers doing studies for the Emperor. And if they made mistakes or miscalculated things, he cut their heads off. So that was their punishment for being stupid. So they were not fooling around when they wrote these things down. They were all very accurate, and they had written and completely explained what this thing looked like, the direction it came from, where it came, how long it took to go, and what happened to the Earth in reaction to the close passing of this giant planet. Revelations perfectly described it, and describes it one step at a time. And very interesting, the Revelations describes where the leaders and the wealthy and the kings and the queens will go into the side of the mountains underground to hide away. And I thought that's really amazing, because that's exactly what the underground facilities have been created for the kings and the queens and the leaders of the nations to hide away under the rocks inside the mountainsides. I thought that was that's
the sixth seal. It's the sixth seal, and
that's
and
correct.
you know I wanted to share something with you because this is directly material to that piece there that you're referring to in the Bible, the sixth seal, and that's Revelation for the listeners that have just tuned in. That's Revelation 6 verses 12 through 17.
Right.
At the 17th verse there is, and the day of his wrath has come, and who is able to stand? So that marks the period of God's wrath from that point forward in Revelation. Now what I wanted to share with you, Bob, is something that I think is really relevant to this timeline. I found it most noteworthy that you mentioned December, possibly of this year, that would be, potentially the next projected likelihood of it being visible to, pretty much everybody regularly.
Right.
And I find that interesting because, well, let me just play this clip. This is a clip. It's only 51 seconds long. This is a prophet of our Heavenly Father, of the Lord. I personally believe, could be wrong, but I personally believe that this particular lady, she had been shown 9/11 prior to it occurring, some other things. She'd seen that Obama was going to get elected prior to that occurring. She has these other folks that are well-known, worldwide well-known prophets with their faces flashed all over the world, on books and things. They rebuke her. They don't like her, and that to me is a really good sign that she's definitely the real deal. The more
she's on to something, right?
Yeah, exactly. But listen to this: 51 seconds. She appeared on the Sid Roth show, and listen to what she says. And the reason I bring this up is because if the next projected appearance is 2016. And if your hypothesis / theory is correct, I would escalate it to beyond a theory. I think it's fact, quite frankly, about this being visible as early as possibly December of this year to the global population. Then the control grid would have to get locked down prior to it being perpetually visible. Otherwise, chaos could ensue, and the elite, if you will, if you want to call them that, the forces of darkness would lose control of the global population, and you would have potentially a French Revolution problem, which of course they don't want. So listen to this. This is Glenda Jackson on the Sid Roth show, sharing with people worldwide what the Lord told her. Listen to this.
And so it has to be a fearful kind of an event, whatever it is. Now, it can be a terrorist event, and it would have to be like multiple terrorist events, like the 9/11 over again, 3 or 4 times, in 2, 3, 4 different cities, or a biological problem of some sort in 2 or 3 or 4 major cities, states, or whatever, to where that would be believed, or moving close into a third world war, to where it looks like militarily it would be accommodated for the powers to be, the covert government. I call it the secret government, if you would, that they would convince the people that we're so close to some political activities that have happened. We're close to World War III, so therefore martial law would be put in there. So these are the 3 or 4 potential reasons that the American people would believe it and accommodate it readily, just like when they did the 9/11 event, when they carried it out, which was, by the way, carried out by evil persons of our own government. It had nothing to do with box cutters and all of that stuff. It was carried out by us, people, bad people in our own government, from the president down at that time. It was carried out by bad guys in our own government. And it was done for a couple of reasons. One, the primary reason being, of course, to bring in the Homeland Security. And the only thing that would allow the American public to clamor for the support of something like the Homeland Security, unconstitutional laws that went with it, and the creation of hundreds of brand new levels of law enforcement, and thousands of new employees under the government in these new governmental policing agencies. The only reason that we would ever buy into that, even on its face, was because people were scared to death of that. That was horrendous kind of an activity, and theoretically done by these crazy terrorists. You know, these guys, by the way, these people couldn't even fly airplanes. And they convinced everybody that they flew these planes into all these buildings, did the Twin Towers, and they went into the Pentagon, and they did this and they did that. That's all baloney. It's unbelievable. And I want to mention that again just briefly in a little while, but the bottom line is that was all done by bad people in our own government. And it was done to accomplish the Homeland Security, which was called the Secret Service, the SS, when Adolf Hitler did it in Germany. He didn't call it, and actually referred to as Homeland Security also. They utilized that terminology when he created the SS, that then, of course, went out and gathered up the Jews and put them in the camps and everything. That was his Homeland Security people. And they actually utilized that same term, which is scary. Whatever. But and what's also scary is that the grandfather of the entire Bush family was partners with another fella here, Harriman, the Harriman family, and Bush, and they supplied financing for the Nazis up until the time that they were literally shut down as a banking entity and put out of business by the FBI for supplying money to the Nazis, and that was George Bush family grandfather. If that don't turn your stomach, people don't even know about that. You look that up, and that'll really upset you. And the idea of putting another Bush in there, of course, that's not going to happen now anyhow. But the idea of having another Bush in there, you might as well dig up Adolf Hitler and put him in. But that's how close they were, literally. The Bush family's banking system with Averell Harriman back in the 30s and into the 40s, they were still supplying, during the war, money and financial support to Adolf Hitler, period. Anyhow, that's a separate outrageous story. But to get back to the Nibiru thing, I indicated in the DVD. By the way, people who want to get the DVD, it's still available on my website. It's bobfletcherinvestigations.com, bobfletcherinvestigations.com on your computer. You can get a copy. Or if you want to write me, everybody grab up a pencil, and in a couple of minutes I'll give you my mailing address. A lot of folks want to get a list of my investigations that are available, et cetera, including the drug operations that I had testified on relative to government drug operations, and also Sonny Bono's murder. I was literally working with Sonny the year that they killed him. He was murdered on the ski slopes to stop a major congressional investigation that I had supplied a bulk of the information on. Sonny was going to start it in 2 weeks in January, and he was killed 1 week before that was going to begin over the Christmas holidays. And I had been hit, as a matter of fact, 6 months earlier myself, and permanently crippled me. But they killed Sonny completely, put him out of business. That was the end of it. Sonny had called me. His offices had contacted me in Los Angeles, where I was living at the time. They called me in December, and they said, Bob, we're ready to go with the thing. We've been working on it for 8 months. You get ready to come into Washington. And I said, I'm absolutely ready to do it, and I was all excited. 10 days after that phone call, they murdered Sonny Bono, and he was killed up on the top of the ski slopes. They told everybody he ran into a tree. Now, let me get back to the Nibiru situation. All right, I had, on the DVD, I said, one thing that's going to start happening is that it's going to affect the sun, and it's going to start having more activity, which has happened. I said it's very specifically going to affect our weather, which is never going to be the same again. Now, I put this in my DVD, which was released 1 year ago. I was predicting for this last year, 2015, relative to what was going to happen. And I said the storms are going to be the biggest that we've had. They're going to be record-breaking. I said that we are going to have an increase in earthquakes, which has happened. I said that the volcanic activity is going to be increasing. And literally, as we speak today, there is a minimum of 40 to 45 volcanoes blowing their tops as we speak. And they don't report much of this stuff. You know, you get little blurps about it every once in a while. There are volcanic activities around the globe like we haven't had in 100 years. And I specifically said that will happen. I also said at that time, unbeknownst to many people, only because they don't study it, they don't keep track of it, I said that the entire planetary system of our solar system had already started to be affected. And I said it will increase over 2015 and, of course, now into 2016, that the planetary structure, all the planets, will be getting affected by Nibiru as it comes back like a bowling ball hitting the bowling pins out in the far reaches of space, or the far reaches of our solar system anyhow. And as that activity takes place, it's going to kick up meteors. We're going to have more meteors and more comets, that type of thing coming in, meteorites. That all has happened also over this last year so far. It increasing, still happening today as we speak. The volcanic activity is getting crazy. The weather, I don't have to say anything about that because that's something you can just look at, all right? And it has happened. We have broken records on every part of the globe relative to weather, whether it's storms, hurricanes, tornadoes. We have tropical storms starting up now even on like the West Coast in funny places where they're not supposed to because that's not the tropics. What's happening, like off of the coast of Oregon, there is a volcano that's been blowing up for quite a while under the water. It's heating the ocean. It is causing warm air off of Oregon's coast, which is causing storms. And the weather people, you know, they either just don't know what's going on or they're intentionally misleading. But they're funny. They say, well, they got this blob. They refer to it as a blob, which I thought was not very scientific. This heated blob out there for some reason, causing strange windstorms and activity off of the West Coast, like a tropical zone, causes hurricanes, etc. This blob is it's mostly just from this one real good size volcanic activity. It's also what's causing the fish to go in different places and different changes and going different areas like the whales and sharks. And sharks have been attacking people the last year more than ever. It's because their feeding areas have been disrupted by underground volcanic or under the ground, under the ocean volcanic activities. It's screwing up the fish normal habitat, changing it. They're going in different places, and now they're biting people in half. They had this tremendous increase in shark attacks for last year, 2015. All of the weather and all of the storms and all of these extraordinary events are going to continue. They're not going to change. They're not going to get back to a normal, structured currents of wind and heat and freezing and cold. That's not going to come back. We have more ice melts. The glaciers are melting like crazy, quicker on the ice caps of both South and North Pole, quicker than they have in ever. Okay, the percentage of increase of the water being melted under the glaciers and causing the glaciers to fall apart and disappear, actually, in some places up north. And here's how much that it has actually done. That is that in Miami, for the last 2 years, the high tide every day in Miami Beach has become so high now, the water line so high off Miami Beach, it comes in 4 to 6 blocks into the city of Miami Beach. And they have spent millions of dollars putting water pumps in every day with the regular high tide. The pumps are in place now, and they have to pump the water out of the regular city highways, or people cannot drive in Miami Beach during high tide. And that's been taking place. It has increased, and it also has increased so bad that they now have budgeted tens of millions of dollars to raise the entire Biscayne Boulevard and the main highways through the Miami Beach. They're going to actually raise the elevation about 10 feet, the entire length of that roadway, so that the water on high tide won't wash over it and go into the businesses.
Wow.
That's a done deal. You can look all this stuff up. Anybody that wants to check on any of this, please, I encourage, look these things up. And the media control is so total, so complete at this point in time, in general, if you're not following it on the computer, looking things up yourself, you do not know what's going on, folks. You do not know what's happening if you don't. Now, that creates a second problem. You can't believe everything and every piece of garbage that's on the internet. You got to be real careful. When you see something that looks like a new news release, check the date on it. You may find out that it's a repeat from something of 2013. So be careful. You can't believe everything, unfortunately, on the internet media. And of course, remember this: the bad guys know how much media is being eaten up by the American public, and they are putting professional full-time, they've got people on a full-time basis putting garbage into the system. So you have to be very careful of that. Don't believe everything you hear. Don't believe me. If I say something, look it up. And if you find that I've made a mistake, drop me a note and let me know about it. I, of course, can't do everything, but the bottom line is I encourage you to look up everything that anybody tells you and take everything with a grain of salt until you're satisfied that it's true. So what we have here, things that I put in my DVD, which is called Incoming, that's the title of it, things I put into that DVD, I put in literally at this time, 3 years ago was when I researched it. 1 year ago is when I released it, and I said, watch out for these things. They have all taken place. Every single one of them have taken place. Now, people say, this last year, they were talking about when they had the racial problems in a couple of places, and they complained. They said, "What's the deal with the local sheriff and the police, the officers and the police officers and sheriff departments? What's with them having military weapons? They have armored cars. They have grenade launchers. They have water cannons. They have personnel carriers built for the military. They have Humvees specially designed and special guns and rifles with huge clips, like regular military rifles." All right? Here's what happened. In 95 was when I first started getting reports of that. That's how far back it goes. And they've been supplying the police, the military equipment into the police and sheriffs all over the United States. You got little places, throughout the South and out in the Midwest, little places in Wichita, Kansas, and stuff like that. Spokane, Washington. Going way back to 95 is when it started, and they started putting these weapons in the hands of the sheriffs. Well, here's the deal. They got with the sheriffs and all these people. Of course, those guys love the idea of the Humvee. They're going to have their own Humvee. They're going to have, armored cars and machine guns and this, that, and what have you, grenade launchers and things of that sort. And so obviously those guys all love it. They get turned on to that stuff, and it excites them. They said, "Look, we can get you this equipment at a real reduced price, and it's going to be stuff that's coming back from the war, et cetera, and we can even help you finance it if you don't have the money for it. Don't worry about it. We'll just put it in your hands and figure out how to get it, pay for it later." They did that, and they have continued to do that from 95 forward up to as of this week. And the reason for that is when they declare martial law, the sheriffs and the police department have agreed, we're going to give you this equipment, but if we call on you for your help in the case of a disastrous martial law configuration, we want you to promise and sign this contract that you will, in fact, support the federal mandates that might come with a martial law mandate. So what they've right away, then the light comes on. Oh, no wonder they did that, right? They didn't just do it it wasn't Santa Claus with equipment for these sheriff's departments and the local police. They have expanded the Homeland Security policing agencies by having these equipment in line, in place at all the local sheriffs and police departments around the country. All right, so that's why, and of course, they brought some of it out during the time when they had racial problems, when they had the shootings and what have you, and all that stuff with the police departments. They brought them out, and people all of a sudden said, "Wow, what are they doing?" When all of a sudden they showed up, that must be National Guard. And they say, "No, it says sheriff on it. It says sheriff on the side of that thing," and that's the reason for it. They became an expanded. Now, also, in the middle of doing my DVD, I found that for the last few years, as the date gets closer on the possibility of Nibiru, as the date gets closer, they have been, even the IRS has been buying under the title, under their IRS requests for funds, etc. They have been buying machine guns and bullets by the millions. That's no exaggeration. You have the IRS, you got the Treasury Department, you got the Forest Service, the guys that used to go out and tag and count reindeer out in the forest, or white-tailed deer out in the forest, and doing the general maintenance of our forest and parks. The park rangers, they've got millions of bullets, millions of pieces of weapons, full automatic weapons. They've been requested and required to all learn how to use full automatic weapons in all these small what I call small secondary organizations. The Homeland Security themselves, you have to look it up for yourself because it changes on a regular basis. Homeland Security, under the Homeland Security banner, they have so many new agencies you couldn't count. They're literally a couple of thousand. It's mind-boggling. And then again, under that, you have each one of them has a couple of thousand people. So it's again almost a secondary army that will respond under the banner of Homeland Security or FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. All right, so FEMA, and of course everybody knows they bought tens of thousands of trailers that they've got stashed away that could function as a prison camp facilities and things of that sort. A couple of million coffins that can handle 2 or 3 bodies that were bought by the CDC in Atlanta a couple of years ago. Now there's a couple million. Originally there's 500,000. 500,000 coffins ordered in advance. 1 million coffins now ordered in advance and put in storage. And I have pictures of that in my DVD. I have pictures and all the numbers on the bullets and the machine guns going into the Forestry Service and other related small agencies. The IRS. What's the IRS doing with full automatic weapons and 2.5 million rounds? That kind of stuff should bother the heck out of people.
Sounds like war.
Well, the bottom line, it's what it is. And here's what it's for. It's to give the elite, illegitimate governing group. As a matter of fact, President Eisenhower, in 1961, when he discovered what was going on at Area 51 back in the 50s and up to 61 when he left office, he said, beware of the defense industrial complex that's growing and eventually is the most fearful thing in the United States of America relative to taking control, and he called it a cabal. The cabal.
Listen to this. Check this out.
Excuse me?
Check this out. Listen to this. This supports what
Sure.
you're saying. This is
Okay.
News Channel 8, WFLA in Tampa, Florida. I randomly stumbled across this recently while flipping the channels on my local TV. Listen to this.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly what I just said, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Exactly what I just said. Now, I used to live I've lived all over the country, and I lived in South America for a while even, but many, many years ago. But I lived in Miami. I have a son down there that runs one of the biggest recording companies in the entire world, as a matter of fact, in Miami. Has been there managing it for 35 years. Et cetera, et cetera. But I lived right there, so I'm completely. When we talk about like the Miami situation with the flooding, also. But the point is, what the situation is that this secret government, all right, they're the guys that are going down underground. They've already gotten all of our money. They spent billions and billions building these underground hideout survival facilities, and they need 1 week when the time comes when all of a sudden there's that planet coming in and it's visually sighted. See, now the first time that takes place, they will already have martial law in effect. They have to have it in ahead of time so that your friendly, on every street corner of the United States will be a military person of some sort, whether he's a local sheriff assigned or the National Guard assigned underneath the military, assigned to Homeland Security. You go, you know how much security they had today at the big football game? It was mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. I don't have the numbers. I had them earlier. I don't have them in front of me. The amount of personnel, besides dogs, mine detectors, metal detectors, gas detectors, chemical detectors, guys, the dogs doing the detection, but Homeland Security guards with machine guns. You go into New York City, in Times Square, or down into the major Grand Central Station, the railroad station, etc. It's machine guns and guys with helmets walking around all the time, with 250 rounds and gas bombs strapped to their belts. That's already here. See, and of course people come up to them and pat them on the back and say, "Boy, we're glad, boy," especially as since 9/11 took place back in 2001, they took down the Twin Towers.
Oh, San Bernardino. San Bernardino.
Sure. Of course, that's small stuff. That's almost a, no disrespect to the people that were killed and injured,
right.
But that's small stuff. You know how many people died at the 9/11 Twin Towers? They took, by the way, they took down 5 buildings. We always say Twin Towers because that's 2. They took down 5 buildings. One of them was not even hit by an airplane; it fell down. All right, but that's not what it fell down from. And I'm not going to get into it any more than let me say this. I've got a follow-up DVD report that I've been working on for an entire year and a half now. It should be ready soon. I'm not going to talk about it yet because I get people that want to order it ahead of time, and I don't want to do that because you never know when I'm going to be interrupted, and I don't want people anticipating it until we have it completed.
Right.
But the report's going to be, I'll tell you what, it's more shocking than Nibiru. Absolutely more frightening and more shocking, and absolutely, again, all totally proven, documented. It is the more frightening than the Nibiru coming in, literally. And that might seem hard to imagine, but when you see it, you will understand what I'm referring to now. But and by the way, anybody wants, let me give you my mailing address. If you want to drop me a note directly to in any regard at all, or you want a little catalog of my reports, the reports that I've done that are on my website also, but the reports that I've done are only things that I have physically done myself. I'm not doing a CNN news report of other people's stuff. It's strictly and exclusively those things that I've investigated or been a witness in relative to corrupted government. You can write me at Bob Fletcher, Post Office Box 216, Bayview, Idaho. That's Box 216, Bayview, Idaho 83803. That's 83803. Post Office Box 216, Bayview, Idaho. Drop me a note. I'll send you a catalog. If you want the 2-disc on Nibiru, the double disc package, it's $24.95. You can send cash, check, money order. You can go online and order any other way you want to. We pay the postage on it. Postage is free on it, and it's 4 hours, double disc. It's a library of information like you've never seen before, particularly on this subject. So let me ask you, do you have a question? I didn't want to miss anything that maybe you particularly wanted to, if I can answer it. If I can't, I'll just tell you I can't answer it. So,
well, the one thing that I was a little bit curious on your take on was that when you look at all, you go back to, like, for example, all the way back to the Iran-Contra affair, and you see the videos that they have out there of, Oliver North and they got the Senate subcommittee that's doing the investigation, and the one senator starts talking about Rex 84, and Oliver North is like kind of freaking out and looking at the other senator, and they, you know what I mean? It's like it's almost like they knew, and if you put that event, and you look at the drug trade, the moving of illegal drugs, Manuel Noriega, all that nonsense. You got Herbert Walker Bush flying for Air America. Tons of cocaine in from the Orient. All this kind of creepy, weird stuff going on, and it's all surreptitious. You know what I mean? It's outside of the purview of the office, the GAO office. Where they can't really track the money. Yeah.
What we call the secret government. Yes.
Is it all linked to PDD 51? The presidential directive for the continuity of government. Or do you see this all ultimately a one big master plan to put all this stuff in place because they've known all this time that this was coming?
No. But what it is, that's the no just for the last part. Did they know it was coming? No.
Oh, okay.
It is one world government, new world order, one world government. George Bush used it many times himself, that terminology, as close as he could. He actually said, we're moving into a new world order, a one world government. He said that over and over again, all right, during his time talking George Bush 1. And then his son came along and stumbled around and followed the best he could. Now you have to realize George Bush was, in fact, when he was vice president for Ronald Reagan, he was, for the most part, he and Bill Casey and some of his other people there, those guys were actually running the presidency for Reagan. They just sort of did what they wanted and told him what to do and what to say. He was strictly a puppet, and that's all there was to it. A very close friend of mine had been with the CIA for ages, actually worked with Bill Casey and wrote the speeches for Reagan and Casey. Anyhow, it is the New World Order, one world government, which goes back many years, goes back to George Bush's grandfather, who was doing the Nazi financing that I mentioned earlier, with Averell Harriman and Bush together. That goes to the 30s. But here's a frightening thing. I want everybody has to get a copy of this book I'm about to tell you about. I used to handle them many years back in '95. We handled them with the Patriot Militia Movement. We had those available. They're on a reprint. All right, and it's called The Report from Iron Mountain. This was put together originally. It was delivered, finished. This report was completed in, period of time. It was delivered to Lyndon Johnson after him and some of his friends eliminated John F. Kennedy after they killed Kennedy and replaced him with Lyndon Johnson as vice president. The report was finished. It had been started by John F. Kennedy, requested to put together a report. And the report, which is called The Report from Iron Mountain, that is the book title, and there is available. It's a $9.95 kind of a thing or something like that. It is still available. You have to go online to find out where to get it. I'm not involved with it. I didn't print it, didn't have anything to do with it. It was finished and printed in 1967. And the idea was they had, for something like 2 years or 3 years, they had run a commission that was put together by, like I said, originally Kennedy. Kennedy was killed, then they delivered it to Johnson. Johnson classified the entire report, which originally was 7,000 pages. And Johnson classified it pretty much forever, put one of those 100-year classifications on the thing, so you're not supposed to get the entire report. You couldn't get it. But one of the people that was involved with the committee on this study to create this study, the report from Iron Mountain, was done on, it was put together on the concept of what has to take place in the United States financially, militarily, psychologically, sociologically, and politically to put us under a one world government headed by the United Nations, to put us into a la-la land, a happy land with a parliamentary structure overseeing world government on all activities of humanity on the entire globe. And what is required, what do we have to do in the United States to convince the American people that this is a way of life that we need to pursue? It's the New World Order, one world government. And so the plans for this thing are in black and white, printed in 1967 and delivered to the presidency. And this book itself, not the report, 7,000 pages, but this 110-page book is a book written by one of the people that was directly involved with the 2 or 3 years of the meeting of this committee. The committee used to meet like every 30 days or whatever it was in the top secret underground facility called Iron Mountain. That's why the title is The Report from Iron Mountain. That's where they met. And they put this together. Now, here's why I'm getting to this it's kind of a long, maybe unnecessary way to do this, but I wanted people to understand what I'm talking about. You have to get this book. If you care about your country at all, you have to get this. It's mind-boggling. Basically what this does, it is a blueprint, and it says it will take 30 years. So it would have put them, they were setting a target for 97 because this was 67 when it was published. And they said, one thing we have to do is we have to control the weather, which our people are now working on. That was in the 60s, working to control the weather and to have full control of the weather by the United States government or by government agency. Okay, I testified before the United States Senate Intelligence Committee and on weather control back in 1995. I sat before the Senate and did that testimony. That's also available. Anybody wants to snoop around, you can find it someplace. It's on YouTube, I think, a couple hundred times. But anyhow, it was a 1995 presentation before the Senate. They have complete weather control. That's been done for years. It's very sophisticated now because it's electronic. It's totally an electronic mechanism by which they can control. They can create tornadoes, create hurricanes, move hurricanes, dissipate them, move them, do whatever they want to. So does the Chinese and the Russians. Both of them, all three of us have complete weather control at this time.
40 seconds.
Now, sure.
We're down to 40 seconds.
Oh, okay, good. Anyhow, get that. What it does, it literally also says when we want to scare the public, what we suggest you use is an artificial attack from unknown terrorists not connected to a country, and that would be the best way to scare the people into going along with world government, and that's what they did in the 9/11. And in my new thing that I'm working on right now, I will prove completely how that was done, who did it, how they managed to carry that out. And it was totally fraudulent, and it was done by bad people of the United States of America. And they killed 4,000 people that day, and another 30,000 have died from breathing the dust from those buildings.
Wow. Wow. And we are now on borrowed time, recorded time. The show is no longer live. That's okay. Thank you so much. I wanted to hear that closing argument, Bob. This is exciting. Folks, Bob Fletcher Investigations. Just open up Google, type in Bob Fletcher Investigations, and you will find his website. There's a ton of stuff that you brought forward this time that we didn't touch upon on the prior show, and a lot of it I wasn't even aware of. This is some amazing research that you brought forward, and very exciting. I'm actually quite excited about the release of your next DVD series. Praise God for your work. Thank you so much, Bob. It looks like